for dealing with SMB and MSRPC protocols. Now these were actually written by a fellow named Ron Bose, who basically spent months digging into MSRPC and RPC and how those protocols work. I don't really wish that on anyone, but it's nice that he was able to do it. He contributed 13 scripts, and so it was quite a gift to the Nmap community. We have informational ones for OS detection, SMB, getting the server stats, system info, security mode. We have enumeration scripts where it connects to the remote server and tries to enumerate data like the users, the domains, the groups, processes, sessions, and shares. And then we have 3 more intrusive scripts that go in, like for example SMB brute tries to do brute force authentication cracking over SMB to try and find the usernames and passwords. SMB check vulns will do vulnerability checks for a number of remotely exploitable MSRPC bugs. And SMB PS exec lets you execute processes on the remote system for things like dumping the password hashes, or starting a remote display server on the system. And so I thought about this a lot, and I had these great new scripts that Ron created, and I thought, well, I really want to test them out. And I don't have many Windows machines on my home network, so I wasn't going to really try them. I couldn't find out much information from that. So I thought, well, who would be a good target for a large-scale scan of this sort of a script? Well, it's their own darn protocol. So you would think if anyone could secure it, Microsoft could. And I was kind of interested to see how they would decide to secure it. Would they block all the SMB ports? Would they very carefully lock down the individual services to prevent you from getting much information? How would that go? And so I did the scan, and I have reported this. I actually did the scan last year and reported the data to MSRC, so I hope they fixed it. If not, it's going to be some late nights in Redmond coming up. So let's see how this scan worked. Step 1, find the target IP addresses. We scanned I used Whois on the Aaron database, typical methods, and found more than 1 million IP addresses assigned to Microsoft and decided to scan them all. I decided to start with a broad version detection scan, and the scan could have been more intrusive and more inclusive, but I decided first we'll start with a medium to light scan to kind of figure out what's going on the network, what is where, because a larger scan would take longer and more likely to raise eyebrows. So here's what we did. I said -T4 to be more aggressive on timing, scan the 50 most popular ports based on our empirical data, do version detection, OS detection, a couple OS detection optimization flags, set the host group to 128 because that scans more in parallel to make the scan quicker, set a host timeout of 10 minutes so we don't waste too much time on one extra slow host, do the output to files, tell it where to get the input Microsoft IP address list from, and let it chug away. Now there was a time when this sort of scan could take a month or more for Nmap to run against 1 million IPs. And to make it faster, Nmap has a wide variety of performance optimization flags you can tune, but that was a real pain in the neck. And now I'm happy to report that Nmap has gotten a lot smarter over the years in its algorithms to do large scans much more quickly. So this scan, it finished in about 26 hours, about 1 day, scanned all the IPs, and found 74,293 hosts up. So I could have even tuned it more to make it go faster, but it's not like I have to watch it running, and making it too fast, again, raises more notice on the network. So from that, let's take a very quick look at the results. So I'm going to switch to a larger, Let me get to the terminal window again. I think I moved it. Yeah, I'll get it. Yeah, I see it. Okay, so here's the larger of the terminals, and we're going to So we look at this giant file, and it's kind of intimidating just in its length in general. It's 361,000, more than 1/3 of a million lines long. So if I was going to go through this whole file with you, we'd be here all night and still only have a small fraction of it. So a little trick I like to do when I do these large-scale scans like this to look at the results is I have a little command that, it's basically just simple Unix shell command that basically finds all the open ports and shows us which services are the most common on the network. So here we see the most common is 4,745 examples of IIS-6, and then more IIS-6. We have to give them that they're at least eating their own dog food here in running a lot of Microsoft stuff, although they do have a lot of Apache. And what I find more useful than actually looking at the most common services is to go down to the bottom and look at the more obscure stuff, because that's where you find the less common services that might be more easily exploitable than the things that everybody runs lots of. And on the network I found all sorts of little printers and teleconferencing systems and various little devices I could log into, like the admin interface of some printers and see their toner level, and that was fun, but it it kind of gets away from our main goal, which was to show what our SMB scripts can do. So we're going to avoid this sort of network voyeurism and instead look at Instead, we're going to look at how the SMB results turned out. So I did the big scans, and I looked at how it worked, and it turned out that the vast majority of Microsoft networks just completely blocked the Windows ports from their networks, such as 135 and 445. And this is probably something, other enterprises and businesses should take note of. If Microsoft feels that it's unsecurable and should be blocked, then you probably would want to as well. But notice I said the vast majority of their networks blocked them. Not all of them did. There were dozens of machines that had 445 open, for example, which is the more common of the more modern of the SMB ports. So I did a new scan, and here we'll look at the scan command. The important thing we really care about is this -- script equals. That says we want to do an NSE scan, and here's the list of scripts that we run, including enum domains, enum processes, basically all of the ones that were not super intrusive that Ron wrote. So syntactically, I could say SMB-brute star, and then or SMB-star and get all of them, but I don't want scripts like SMB-brute. Even I'm not crazy enough to brute force attack Microsoft's passwords and then present about it at a big conference. So instead, I just used the less intrusive ones to see if we could still find interesting information. Now, before we look at the results, I would like to get some commitment from the audience. Who here thinks that Microsoft's SMB was completely secure? Not even the Microsoft people are raising their hands. Well, let's take a look. Maybe Microsoft will surprise us a little bit and be very well locked down. So this time we're going to look at another file. This is the one from that new scan I mentioned. And we don't have time to look at it in a lot of depth, so I'll just go to one of my favorite machines here. We see, first of all, that it has 976 closed ports. So instead of doing the default filter, default deny, and saying only allow access to the ports that we want to, they've set it so that we can access all the ports and see whether they're open or closed. And then they've explicitly banned a few ports like telnet we can see and auth we can see. And so instead of default deny, they did default allow and then blocked some ports. So we'll take off a couple security points for that. Then we'll go down a little bit, look at the open port lists. you can see there's a huge number of them. And really, when you want to secure your systems, you want to try and minimize the potential avenues for attack. And so in this case, we're going to have to deduct a few more points for having so many open ports. Now, we finally get to the host script results you can see at the bottom. This is the NSE stuff that we were talking about, and we can see whether those manage to find any interesting information. So SMB enum shares is the first one that reports. We see the anonymous IPC share, and then we see some restricted shares for admin, net login, C drive, and D drive. Now they are restricted, but I'm not sure that it's still best practice to share your drives across the internet. And if we had used the SMB brute script, maybe we could have found some passwords there. So we have a few more scripts. And then we get to SMB enum users. This is the one that tries to enumerate all the usernames on the machine. And we can see that it was actually pretty successful. Here's an administrator account here. And we've got this guy, Richard. He's the boss man is his username. And so you can see you get the username as well as some supplemental information there. Let's see, there were a few other ones that I wanted to highlight here. MSB50net is the Building 50 networking team. So again, you get a little more, since we used the script in verbose mode, we get more information than just the usernames. Even things like, this one, the password does not expire, normal user account. This one's called not a guest, exclamation point. Here's one. It says support Microsoft Corporation, Redmond, Washington. And my favorite, though, has got to be the t-shirt ho. So yeah, a lot of information you can find with these SMB scripts. And I would like to mention that, like I said, it was actually Ron who did all the work writing them. All I did was just point them at Microsoft and pull the trigger. And Ron actually, I think, are you here today, Ron? Right here. Awesome. Let's give Ron a round of applause. All right, so now that's one large-scale example of SMB, of NSE scanning. And I'm happy to report that Nmap's co-maintainer, David, now has a great example of other types of fun things you can do with the scripting engine.
Thanks, Fyodor. So have you ever had sort of a simple idea that just started growing and growing and growing and grew into something, in this case, kind of great? That's what happened to us with one of our NSE scripts. We have a script called HTTP favicon. It's a pretty simple idea. You guys know what a favicon is. We open up the web browser here. It's this little icon that appears next to the address in your browser. You can download that and hash it and collect a bunch of these hashes and build a database. And then later on, you can look things up in the database and try and match patterns with the icons. The idea